Chairman of this committee.
All right, at this time, I'd like to ask Barbara Hayes, if she would, to call the roll.
Jim Bledsoe.
Here.
Jim Bledsoe is present. William Brown.
Here.
William Brown is present. Harold Cannon.
Here.
Harold Cannon is present. Bill Cox.
Here.
Bill Cox is present. Jeff Griggs.
Here.
Jeff Griggs is present. Jeff McMillan.
Here.
Jeff McMillan is present. Tom Rice.
Here.
Tom Rice is present. Jim Ripley.
Here.
Jim Ripley is present. Julie Schuster.
Here.
Julie Schuster is present. Clayton Stout.
Yes, ma'am.
Clayton Stout is present. James Stroud.
Here.
James Stroud is present. Trey Teague.
Here.
Trey Teague is present. Jamie Woodson.
Here.
Jamie Woodson is present.
Thank you, ma'am. If there's anyone in the audience that has not signed the sign-up sheet, please do so. Pass it back through there. We want everybody to sign the sheet that's present. Okay, at this time, we will go to Commissioner McMillan and the Fisheries Committee.
I'm the chairman of the Fisheries Committee, and we're going to listen to have Bobby Wilson do his presentation on the 2013 proposed changes. There will be nothing for us to actually act on today or tomorrow. There'll be about a 60-day grace period, and we'll actually vote on those final changes in October. But there can be discussion today and tomorrow. Bobby.
Thank you, Commissioner McMillan. Thank you, Commissioners. Yeah, the regulations that we're going to be discussing today are just a preview, as Commissioner McMillan mentioned. And, of course, everything that are in our regulations are summarized and put in a fishing guide. And our goals in the Fisheries Division are to protect the resource and also to promote better fishing. And the factors that we look into regarding that are biological limits, the needs of user groups, and trying to keep it as simple as we can. And if you looked at our fishing guide, you might think that's something that we don't do, but we do try to keep it as simple as we can. And some of the regulations that we're proposing are actually, we've kept trying to keep it simple, trying to simplify it in mind when making them. So you'll see that here in a little bit. And just real quick, this was presented by Frank Fisk, the Assistant Chief of Fisheries, at the June Commission meeting, but for the benefit of the new commissioners and members of the audience to let you know the process that we go through in setting the regulations. In April, we asked for comments from the public for about 30 days. We take those recommendations from the public as well as recommendations that are developed in the regions from the fisheries folks and the law enforcement folks. They develop those proposals and we bring those together at a May meeting where all the biologists get together and discuss them for a couple of days. And then from there, we sometimes all the recommendations that come out of there, by the way, are not acted upon or not approved. And in fact, some of them that leave there through the process end up getting eliminated as a result through the same process. In June and July, the fishery staff summarizes those proposals and sends them out to the regions for their review, and they discuss them at their regional staff meetings. And in August, we presented to the director's staff, which we did a couple of weeks ago, and now here we are today, as Commissioner McMillan mentioned, as a preview of these recommendations. And just so you know, it's about a 60 days between now and the time that it's acted on, but it's about a 45-day actual public comment period. And in that time in October, the commission will vote on the proclamation rules. And then right after that, once these are voted on and approved, the fishing guide will be prepared and printed, and then March 1, the effective date of the fishing proclamation. The very first thing I want to talk about is probably something that's received a lot of attention, caused a lot of controversy in our state. You may or may not have heard about umbrella rigs, but actually an umbrella rig is this contraption that you see on the left. It's been used for years by striper fishermen to catch the hybrid striped bass and striped bass in our reservoirs. And we, about 10 years ago, in conjunction with the striped bass people over concern of excess mortality of these umbrella rigs that were causing, in their mind at least perceived, that they were causing mortality of these striped bass in the summertime. We developed a regulation so that I'm not even going to read it because It is complicated, but for 10 years, we never had a call or a question on it. Nobody called. Everybody understood it. All the striper guys understood it. It was never any need for us to change it until October of 2011, when this guy right here named Paul Elias used something called an Alabama rig, which falls under the definition of an umbrella rig, and in Alabama, and I think at Lake Guntersville, in a major bass tournament, and won the tournament and easily beat everybody else by several pounds. And of course, this became the latest fad, the latest rage for all the waters everywhere across the country. And we started getting calls. I got a call the night of the tournament about this, what are we going to do? Is this legal in Tennessee? And we, all the regions, our office, we were inundated with calls from people. A lot of them were in favor of legalizing it. A lot of them said, well, they should make it legal. And then most people called because they were confused over the regulation. And so just to kind of give you an idea, umbrella rig, this is kind of like an Alabama rig as such. And the one on the left is legal because it only has, it's got more than 3 lures. And when you get to that point, only one can have a hook, and that one is legal in our interpretation as it stands today. The one on the right is not legal because it's got more than 3 lures, and 5 of them got hooks in them. Also, in looking at these are legal or not legal depending on which one you're looking at, but the far left is 3 lures. The one in the middle is 3 lures, and on the right is more than 3 lures. If you notice that the 2 on the ends where it says lure with the little spinner blades, they're counted as a lure, even though they don't have a hook on there. But that's not legal in Tennessee as it is today. And even more, the one on the left with the crankbaits, they have multiple hooks, but that doesn't matter. They're just 3 lures. And the one in the middle, the hook size are smaller than number 6, so therefore that is legal. And the one on the right again is a typical Alabama rig, and it's got more than 3 lures with number 6 larger hooks. We've been asked by our enforcement people to look into something that simplifies it. They don't want to go out there with a measuring device trying to figure out what's smaller than number 6 or whatever, and it's very confusing to the public. So we didn't know for sure how the general public felt about our regulation as it pertains to Alabama rig or umbrella rigs. So with that in mind, we asked our creel clerks in the spring of 2012 to go out and survey some anglers. We're going to try to get about 600 interviews if that were possible. We have 11 creel clerks scattered across the state. We want them to interview just the striped bass anglers and the black bass anglers, or the people that fish for largemouth and smallmouth bass. With the crappie fishermen, the bluegill, the catfish, for this survey, we didn't feel like it was relevant because they don't fish with them anyway. So we were targeting the people that might use it, might have an opinion on it. In looking at the umbrella rig survey, we targeted the striped bass anglers. We were only able to interview 115. That's really quite a few of them, considering there's not as many striped bass anglers out there as there are for largemouth bass anglers. But we asked if they fished the umbrella rig, and most of them said yeah. We asked if that one hook limits their catch, and they thought it did. And we asked if one hook could be changed or should be changed to allow more than a single hook. Majority of them said no. Then the Alabama rig survey, we targeted black bass anglers, and again, we interviewed twice as many as what we thought we needed. So that's a very significant number right there. We feel like our results are representative of probably most of the black bass anglers across the state. And we asked if they were aware of the Alabama rig and modified forms like the 3 lure rig that's legal in Tennessee, and majority of them, 87%, said yes. And we asked if they've used a modified form for use in Tennessee, and half of them had, just about half. This is where it gets tricky. We asked if they supported or opposed legalizing the full Alabama rig for use in Tennessee. About a third said yes, about a third said no, and about a third were neutral. So if you take out the neutral part, it's roughly 50-50 or pretty close to that. And if it had been 80-20 or one way or the other, where 80 were in favor or 80 were opposed, it would have been a lot easier for us to come up with a recommendation for this. But with this in mind, we know that a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't like it, and so we didn't really want to increase the number of at least lures or hooks that they could use because of the number of people that were opposed to it. But at the same time, we want to make it better for those who thought it was a good thing to use. They can only use right now. They can only use 3 lures with hooks. They could on an Alabama rig. They can't use those 2 extra wires or arms to put anything on there, any kind of lure at all. So we talked at our biologist meeting for probably 2 hours on this over a 2-day period. And we came up with a recommendation that's finally developed out of our regional and Nashville staff, and that is to just allow only 3 hooks, whether they're single or treble, per rod. I know that some people might think that's restricting them, but we actually met at the Bass Pro Shop in Sevierville, went out and combed the aisles of all the lures that were out there and looked to see how many possible lures there were that had more than 3 hooks. We didn't find any. There was one thing they used, whatever it's called, sabiki rig, yeah. They use that for bait, and it has more than 3 hooks on it. I think it's got 5. And this would restrict them unless we could come up with some kind of recommendation to just restrict that. But other than that, there are no other, we couldn't find any more. I even looked at muskie lures thinking they have 4 or 5 treble hooks on there, and they only had 2, most of them did. So anyway, this is what we're recommending, and I think it'll keep things a lot simpler. There's no hook size restriction. There's no, if it's over 3, then you go to 1. It's just plain and simple, only 3 hooks, and they can be treble hooks or single hooks per rod. So if passed, the regulation that this gear right here, which says legal, currently it's only 3 lures, but we would say it would be legal because it only has 3 hooks. And the spinner combination only has 3 lures, but it actually will only have 3 hooks, so it would be legal under the regulation if passed as we proposed. And this particular get up here was not legal, but if it was passed, it would become legal. Because why? Because it has 3 lures? No, because it only has 3 hooks. Those 2 on the end don't count. We don't care. They're lures, but it doesn't matter as long as there's no more than 3 hooks. And this one here, the one with the crankbaits, currently is legal. It would be illegal because obviously it has more than 3 hooks. And I've been told by a lot of our creel clerks that have interviewed black bass anglers and seen them that use the Alabama rig or the Tennessee rig, and very few of them use this rig right here. Very few use the one with the crankbaits because they're too hard to pull. The one with the smaller ones with the size smaller than the number 6 that a lot of people will use, or some people, not a lot, but some people use for crappie, would become illegal or not legal anymore because there are more than 3 hooks. By the way, not many people that I know have used a Alabama type rig for the crappie, but I think it's a possibility that's out there. And then the one on the far right was not legal before. It's still not legal, but it's not because well, I'll go back here. It's because hang on, bear with me just 1 second. I may have busted the machine. Okay. Well, anyway, there were more than 3 hooks. I'll put it that way. All right, that's our recommendation. If it's okay, I'll just go through with all the recommendations unless you want to stop and talk about each one, and we can talk about them at the end.
I just want to ask, well, whatever regulation is agreed upon or passed, are you going to be able to put that illustration in the guidebook?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Picture like you've been showing there.
Yes, we can do that. Okay, skipjack herring. We've, as biologists, have been talking about skipjacks for about 5 or 6 years at our biologist meeting. And one of the reasons we talked about it is several years ago we had information that individuals from other states were coming down into Tennessee and catching barrelfuls of skipjacks on a non-resident sport fishing license, which they can do, and they're taken back to their state and they're selling them for $4 or $5 or $6 a piece for people to use for catfish bait. And but we didn't have much information on the biology of them, so every year we try to go concentrate on trying to get some information on the biology of skipjack herring, and it's really hard to get. We still don't have any information 5 years later, but we really decided to go forward with a regulation that would limit the number of skipjacks that could be potentially caught and taken per angler. So we're recommended a 50 per day creel limit, which would probably discourage non-resident anglers from coming down and catching them if they could only bring back 50 or even 100 as a possession limit. So That's our proposal there, that we've also had some input from some other anglers, from catfish anglers, who have recommended some kind of restriction on skipjacks for the same reason. And anyway, this is our proposal to go with a creel limit of 50 per day. This is for sport fishermen. We're not recommending any change in the commercial fish regulation. My understanding is, first of all, skipjacks are caught by anglers up close to the dam, and they're caught by rod and reel, of course. Well, commercial fishermen, number one, can't fish up close to the dam where they are because of the regulation, and they can't catch skipjacks with a rod and reel and sell them. It's not a legal commercial fishing method. So when they do catch them, it may be just occasional. It's not, they don't target them, but if they catch them and they don't catch that many or that often, we would just didn't want to restrict them from being able to at least benefit from selling those if there was a market for them. So this would only apply to sport fishing. And the methods, this is a law enforcement recommendation. Right now, in section 16, shooting fish and turtles, you're not allowed to shoot fish and turtles with firearms. It's prohibited. Well, somebody wondered if air rifles is not considered a firearm, and it's not. So we've been asked to add that in there. So it's kind of a minor, more like just a house cleaning regulation there. Going to Region 1, the Kentucky Lake Red Ear Sunfish or shell crackers. Currently, the regulation is that there are 30. You're allowed to keep 30. Only on Kentucky Lake, there's a statewide limit of 20. And so what we're recommending doing is decrease the creel limit from 30 to 20 to go in line with the statewide. By the way, the state of Kentucky on Kentucky Lake has also got a creel limit of 20. So it would be in line with the state of Kentucky as well. Pickwick Lake on smallmouth bass. Currently, we have an 18-inch length limit. That's the statewide length limit on reservoirs for the most part. On smallmouth bass is 18 inches. And the Pickwick is surrounded by the state of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. And all three have different regulations on smallmouth bass. I think Mississippi's got, Alabama's got a 14-inch length limit. We have 18, and Mississippi has no length restriction on there. So we've been working with the other two states for the last several years and trying to come up with a consensus and some consistent regulation, so for the benefit of the anglers, so they don't have to worry about what state they're fishing in to worry about what size fish they're catching. So we finally, I think we've got some agreement from other states, and we're willing to drop ours to 15 inches. Alabama's going to raise theirs to 15, and Mississippi's going to go to 15. And again, this is a tri-state agreement. We're going to meet with them next week to finalize. And I guess, by the way, if one of the two states backs out of it, we might consider withdrawing our proposal. But for the time being, we're going to go with 15 inches. I think the other two states are going to go along with that too. Carroll County Lake is a new lake opened outside of Huntington, Tennessee. It opens on March the 23rd, 2013. So because it opens next year, we have to establish some regulations. These regulations will be similar to the regulations we have on a lot of our agency lakes. This lake is not managed by the TWRA. It's managed by the Carroll County Watershed Authority, but they've asked for some management recommendations from us, and we were glad to assist. And we're recommending largemouth bass at 18-inch minimum length limit with a creel limit of 2 per day. The bluegill / red ear sunfish, no length limit, but a creel of 20 per day. Crappie, a 10-inch length limit, which is a statewide limit, and a creel of 10 per day. And blue and channel catfish, no length limit, but a creel of 5 per day. Region 1 agency lakes, Herb Parsons Lake and Whiteville Lakes are located in the western part of the state. Herb Parsons is located just down the street from one of the commissioners here that's probably visited several times. And we stock it with crappie, and they do some natural reproduction, but there was some concern that they weren't growing very well, that they were slow growing, and there was a lot of small ones in there. And so we looked at the age and growth to determine whether these crappie were growing properly or if they were ever going to get up to the statewide length limit, which is 10 inches. And so we determined that the growth was relatively slower, and we recommended to drop the length limit on crappie from 10 inches to 8 inches. We did the same thing with Glen Springs Lake, not too far from there, about 2 years ago, and this is what we're recommending for Her Parsons and Whitewell Lakes. Creel limit remained the same, but the length limit is going to be reduced, recommended to 8 inches. Region 2, the only recommendation we have there is a small park lake in Clarksville. They asked us to put some kind of restriction on there for catfish because we stock it and they stock it. And right now they can take all they want to out of there, so we're recommending a no length limit, but a creel limit of 5 per day. That's kind of a standard creel limit for catfish for a lot of agency lakes and park lakes too. Going to Region 3 on Cordell Hole largemouth bass. Prior to 2010, there was no size regulations on largemouth bass. There was some concern by anglers and by commissioners that due to the fact there weren't many bigger largemouth bass, they'd like us to propose some kind of regulation that would indeed put the largemouth bass back to where they eventually would grow to a larger size. And so in 2010, we implemented a 17 to 23 slot limit, which I'll explain in just a second, but you could keep one over 23, or you can keep one over 23 and 2 under 17. That's the current regulation that we have now. To illustrate this a little bit better, right now you can keep one over 23 inches, and you can keep 2 under 17, but in the red zone, if that fish is between 17 and 23 inches, you have to release it back into the water. So again, we had heard that there was some dissent or some concern over anglers about this regulation, so we conducted a questionnaire from our creel clerk over there in 2011, and we asked if they liked the existing slot limit, the 17 and 23, one above and one below. 55% of them were okay with it, 45% didn't like it. So then we asked the ones who didn't like it, do they fish in bass tournaments on Cordell Hole? 50% said yes, and roughly 50% said no. And then we asked them, would they support a lower slot limit? For example, a 16 to 21 inch slot limit like the smallmouth bass regulation on Dale Hollow Lake, which is just adjacent to Cordell Hole. A lot of people that fish Cordell Hole also fish Dale Hollow, so they're familiar with that regulation. So we asked them if they would be in favor of that. 63% said yes, and 37% said no. So what we're recommending is changing the 1 over 23, the 17 to 23 slot, and 2 under to a 16 to 21 inch slot or protected length range, and but increasing the creel limit so they can keep 2 over 21 and 3 under 16. And this will allow them to keep, if they just fish for largemouth bass, their limit of 5 bass, which is a statewide creel limit on bass. Of course, they could catch smallmouth bass or spotted bass too, but they still only allowed 5 bass total. Parksville Reservoir on the Ocoee River. This is a small, relatively small body of water. It's only less than 2,000 acres. About 2 years ago, a guy caught the current state record spotted bass was 6 pounds 7 ounces out of Parksville Reservoir. That all sounds good, except this spotted bass turned out to be what it's considered. It's an Alabama spotted bass, and that was determined by genetics. And the spotted bass that's native to Tennessee is the northern spotted bass, or some people call it the Kentucky bass. And they don't grow nearly as big as Alabama spotted bass, but this fish was illegally introduced into Parksville Reservoir. It all sounds good except for the fact that Alabama spotted bass hybridize with our native smallmouth bass, and they can cause problems. They've done that in some other reservoirs in Georgia, and they're causing some serious problems there where they don't have very few, or have very few of the native smallmouth bass left in that reservoir. So when we conducted our electrofishing in 2010 from Parksville Reservoir, 100% of the spotted bass that were collected were the Alabama spotted bass. And then also from the electrofishing surveys we started back in 2000, well, not started, but going back to 2003, the blue line indicates largemouth bass, the yellow indicates spotted bass. So as you can see, from 2003 to 2011, the percentage of occurrence of the Alabama spotted bass has taken over in Parksville Reservoir. So we're recommended on the spotted bass in that reservoir to remove the creel limit, and so that and also they do not count towards the daily creel limit of other black bass. So in other words, I mentioned before about the 5 bass limit, black bass in Tennessee. they could only keep 5, either smallmouth or largemouth or a combination of those two, but spotted bass, they would not count towards the creel limit and then keep all they want. Region 4 Cherokee Reservoir walleye, there's currently an 18-inch length limit on there, but we're stocking sauger and saugeye, which is a hybrid between a walleye and a sauger, and they don't grow nearly as big as a walleye does, and it sometimes, especially a saugeye, it looks a lot like a walleye, and it's very confusing to the anglers. So we're recommending to remove the 18-inch length limit in a 5-fish creel and down to 15 inches for all 3 species, the walleye, sauger, and saugeye, make it length limit the same, but 15 on all 3 species with a creel limit of 10. So we're actually increasing the number they can keep potentially of walleye and decreasing, so the anglers should like this. Muskie, I only bring this up because Melton Hill Reservoir has got a trophy muskie fishery, and the Upper Caney Fork River, Collins River, and places like that has got a really good muskie fishery. And there was some discussion at our biologist meeting to place some regulations on both of these reservoirs. One at Melton Hill, in the wintertime, there's the Bull Run steam plant. When it lets out water, it's warmer than the surrounding water, and it concentrates all the shad and prey fish up in there, and it now also brings along the muskie. And so there's a bunch of them up in there in the wintertime when the Bull Run steam plant is running, and they're like fish in a barrel, and people fish on the bank with all kinds of baits, and they swallow the hook and they mistreat them, or some of them do, and there's some mortalities expressed by the muskie fishermen that we need to do something about it. We're considering a couple of regulations, but we decided to hold off this past year where they want to do, Region 4 folks want to do some surveys of the anglers to determine to find out what their preferences were, whether it was to restrict the bait or just restrict the area during a time when the Bull Run steam plant is operating. Last year was a mild winter, as you recall, and Bull Run steam plant never even fired up, so there was nobody fishing basically. So this year, if it's a colder or at least a typical winter in Tennessee, they'll probably fire the steam plant back up, and we hope to get some interviews to find out which of the methods they prefer, whether it's a bait restriction or an area restriction. And then we'll probably come back next year with some kind of proposal. In the Upper Caney Fork River, there was a proposal there. There's some research going on by Tennessee Tech University, and that research won't end up until next year. And so we prefer to wait until the research is in, and next year we'll come back with actually just a basic muskie. There'll be some muskie proposals this time next year, we think. So basically, we're saying no change for 2013 on the muskie. I just want to bring it to your attention because some of you may have gotten phone calls or may get phone calls on it. Region 3 and 4, the wild trout regulation changes up in basically the Cherokee National Forest area. Currently, this is a page out of our book on wild trout regulations, and it's kind of complicated. I guess if you're a trout fisherman in that area and you've done it for years, it's probably not complicated, but if you're a newcomer, it's pretty complicated. And we have a guy on staff, he's a wild trout biologist. He's been looking at the wild trout populations up there for the past 20 years. And over the course of the last year or so, working with Trout Unlimited and the Cherokee National Forest people and trout other folks that fish it, we've gotten some survey information and making some recommendations this year. We're going to take some of these rivers that have specific restrictions, and we're going to try to simplify things a little bit. We're Xing out a lot of the length limit regulations on there so that it'll look kind of like this. This is not exactly what it would look like, but the streams, I won't read them all, but there they are in front of you, are reducing the creel to 5. They still don't restrict it to a gear with only to use single hook and artificial lures in those particular river systems. And the north, these other ones here below it with the creel of 7, there are no gear restrictions. Instead of putting it there, what we're going to do is take all that and just say all other streams in the Cherokee Wildlife Management are not listed above, and the other one, and it would, the creel limit would be 7. And another thing they're going to do is recommend removing the 6-inch statewide length limit on brook trout in Tennessee statewide. So this has got buy-in from our folks. It's got buy-in from Trout Unlimited, from the Cherokee National Forest. We feel like it's a good regulation that will simplify the regulations as they are now. And it's also similar to the way some of the regulations are in the Smoky Mountains National Park, so. Now, that's all the sport fish. Do you want to stop or ask questions? You may go back straight into commercial fishing.
I think it might be better to separate it and go ahead and answer any questions on
Okay.
the sport fishing
John.
alone.
Okay.
Are there any questions from the commission about the proposed changes in the regulations? Bill?
I've got one for sure. The fishermen that go to Pickwick or wherever to catch skipjack are concerned that 50 is perhaps too low because when they have to go up there to catch fish back and forth, they'd like for you to consider 100 as a better number if you talk about that. I don't know how you determine 50, but
Well,
that's a little low.
Well, that was a number that we tossed around, and there's really no biological reason for it, other than that it just seemed like a good number. I did talk to a couple of anglers in the area that don't have to drive too far, and without even mentioning what we were considering, I asked them what they would think would be a good creel limit, and they said 50. Of course, they don't drive as far as the folks that you represent, and so it's no big deal to them. They can go back day after day if they needed to. One other consideration that needs to be brought into is I mentioned this to the striped bass, Tennessee Striped Bass Association in May, after we had our biologist meeting, just told them that we were considering this because striped bass guys use skipjacks for bait, live skipjacks for bait. And when I said 50, they thought that was too many. They thought it should be 15 or 20. So, we're going up to 100. That might cause some resistance from some of the striped bass guys, but I don't know. It's not a firm number. We could consider 100, I guess.
The striped bass fishermen wanted less than
They wanted less because up there in their area, they're seeing fewer up there. That's they said at Melton Hill Tailwater, they used to see them up there quite a bit, and they don't see any anymore at Melton
Well, the
Hill.
problem, I think, and where this originated, for anybody that doesn't know, is there's a group out of Alabama that's bringing refrigerated trucks to the ramps and catching them thousands and thousands of these fish, and that may be where these fish went up there and taking them and selling them to the pay lakes in Ohio and Illinois for bait. And the fishermen are unhappy about it, and they want to figure out how to, without hurting the Tennessee fishermen, how we're going to stop these guys. I don't know whether a possession limit of 200 or 300 or limiting what they can catch to make it not feasible for them to catch 5,000 fish in a trip.
We can put that out there as a recommendation.
Are they catching them on rods and reels? How are they?
Yeah, the guys that are coming in and catching them, and really catfishermen in Tennessee and other places that want to catch them by rod and reel. They're really good. They're easy to catch certain times of the year, using little jigs or flies, and that's how they catch them, and use them either for live bait or for dead bait.
So these commercial guys are using rod and reel catching 5,000 fish?
Well, the ones that are coming from up north, they're buying a non-resident sport fishing license, which allows them to catch them with a rod and reel, and they're taken back to their state. And of course, we don't have any authority beyond our borders. I don't think. I may be speaking out of turn for law enforcement, but I've been told that, and it may be illegal in their state for them to do it, but it will be up to their enforcement people to enforce that.
What they're doing, if I might, they're bringing 10 or 12 fishermen with them and putting them out wading or putting them in boats, and they'll just haul them in as hard as they can all day long and put them in refrigerated trucks, and they might stay 3 or 4 days and catch as many as 3,000 or 4,000 fish.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the commission?
I just got a comment on the Cordell Hull regulations. I really appreciate y'all considering that because it was an economic impact on that area because with a 3-fish limit, it was hard to get any tournaments going there and stuff, and I think that will benefit it without damaging the resources. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And the 16 to 21 is still a trophy fish regulation. It's not like we dropped it entirely from 17 to 23 to go to 16. 16 to 21 are still some big fish, so it's not like we dropped it entirely.
I'm Odell Bradley, Tennessee Sportsman, and Jim and I and several of the fishermen have been in contact. For 12 years, I've done a public television show about the youth. And what I give before each one of y'all got a handout is about Tennessee Bass Federation. You'll see right in front of you, there's one laying there. Tennessee Bass Federation has a 5-fish limit. Dwayne Dobson's here from the Federation. He's an area he came by. And so our young people that would be fishing on the Cordell Hull, they can't have a tournament there. Because of the 3 fish, if you go up today, and I live on the edge of the lake, you couldn't catch a smallmouth if you tried all day. You might catch Kentucky, and if you catch a smallmouth, it's a big river smallmouth. So the 5-fish limit going to largemouth will help. As you'll see, high school bass clubs are on the rise. Perfect place in Jackson County. It's a rural county. In Smith County, I'm sure we'll have one going. We want to appreciate Jim, appreciate Bobby, and I want to brag on the commission for listening. TWRA, the agency, has really listened to a lot of fishermen on this item. And I want to brag on Bobby and Mike Jolly and for them listening about this limit. But economically, it stifled the county in the last 2 years because people don't come and stay in the hotels and because you can't fish those bigger tournaments. So we'll appreciate that. The other thing is slot limit works great, doesn't it, Mr. Bill? We went to Del Hollow 07, 09 with the whole commission and went up there and probably caught 40 fish with all you. Y'all welcome to bring them all back if you want to. And we caught a lot of fish to show that slot limit from, the 16-21 worked great. You go up there, if you catch 10 fish on Del Hollow, you'll catch one probably over 21, and at night, probably 2 or 3. So that has worked great. And the slot limit, this 17-23, a 23-inch fish on Cordell Hull is a 8-pounder. And in 2.5 years in tournaments, or we recorded, there's only been 3 weighed in ever. So that's the reason we really thank you for considering that 5-fish limit. The other thing I'm going to give you, I'm going to pass this around. Y'all got a chapter in a chapter in across of Tennessee of the National Wild Turkey Federation that won for the whole United States, Wounded Warrior Wheeling Sportsman for the whole United States. Kids Day, we just had 600 in Crossville, and then Cookville had 300 Kids Day. And so just know that you're doing a great job. TWRA has helped in existing and all that. Camp Discovery on Cordell Hull is where we hold this hunt. So there's been a lot of good that's taken place there. And then the umbrella rig, Bobby, it's the balance. That's why we want 5, but with this new regulation, if you got 2 lures, it'll work fine.
Okay.
And the skipjack, Mr. Bill, it's different times of year. If you go in the spring, they're this long. And as they go longer, so they're wanting to get all they can get because in the spring, a 1,000 might not weigh 100 pounds, but now they weigh 500 pounds. I mean, they're big fish. But anyway, I just want to thank y'all, brag on the agency. In the past, maybe they didn't listen like they should, but it sounds like communication and education is much better now. Y'all can get to everybody and then present to the agency, what they need to do. And then the last thing in this real quick, a couple years ago with Gary Myers and Ron Fox, I recommended, I'm in the car business, been in 19 years, but I do 50-something shows, 40-something shows on Tennessee Sportsman, public television, don't get paid for it, love the kids. If you're licensed in this little brochure, I think we ought to give the sportsman's license holder, y'all have a free fishing day and a free hunting day. But you do it a certain day. I think you ought to make responsibility on the sportsman to bring folks in. In the car business, you're an employee, you can get somebody a discount. In this business, I think Odell Braswell's the example I've got. Any day can take a sportsman out in the woods. I can take somebody new to try to get them in. Y'all understand that? Put it on us to bring other people in. Mr. Bill, you want to take somebody duck hunting? I don't know who the duck hunter is in here. Instead of him having a buy license, let us go print out a permit. Odell Braswell takes this guest on this day. If he goes, kills a duck, kills a deer, fishes, he buys a license. He'll buy one if he goes with me. Okay, y'all with me? Put it on us. Insanity is trying to do the same thing about license, and getting different results. I'm sure they're going down. I may be wrong, and I've seen the things we do on TV that says, buy a Tennessee license. If you had a kid catching a fish, somebody would notice that more. But we're dedicated to youth and brag on 10 times, y'all. I asked my wife with me today, I said, how many times they mentioned youth? 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times. See, that's really important, and you'll see from this. And then the other thing I've got is, we do an event where you could have people come to an event, go to any school. Wildlife officers are not known by the people in their county now. They don't know who they are. Well, we need to get them to meet them. We can have an event much like y'all had. We can do it in every county. Have an event with a wildlife officer, comes in, brings in ducks, unlimited quails, all the other people, and to get in, you gotta have a hunting and fishing license. That's all it is. There you make some more. And I think we still get reciprocal, don't we, Jim? We sell a license, we get reciprocal. But anyway, that's what's in the brochure. Y'all look it over. But there's another way to make money for the state, to bring license, but put it on the sportsman to bring these new people in. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just a question for Chief Wilson. On the sabiki rig, did you say that you were considering excluding that? I've only used it in saltwater, not in freshwater, but they're little bitty hooks. And did you all decide that ultimately that wasn't a necessary exclusion, or what was your thinking?
We didn't, we're not recommending an exclusion, but I said if someone could come up with something that just specifically excluded that or something like that, we would consider that. That was the only concern we had among some of our folks at our biologist meeting was, but not, I don't know, a whole lot of people use that either. Could they go just 3 hooks instead of whatever, however many it is it 5 hooks or something like that?
Yes, sir, or more.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, okay.
But the hooks are so tiny, I mean, you could
Right.
regulate the size of the hook. They're not as big as your fingernail.
Well, yeah, in a way, but we still get that back to that hook size thing. That was one of the things we were trying to get away from was the field officers
Right.
out there trying to enforce what size is a that hook that they use for that.
Are there any other questions from the audience concerning sports fishing?
Yes, sir.
Owen Schroeder. This newspaper in the state.
Owen Schroeder, Clarksville Leaf Chronicle, Tennessee's oldest newspaper. On Liberty Park Lake, we have a youth fishing rodeo there every year on the Free Fishing Day. And the agency and other organizations put about 2,000 pounds of catfish in the lake. Will this 5-fish limit affect the youth rodeo? Because
Yes.
many of these kids catch 20 or more small catfish during that rodeo.
It would. You'd probably have to just amend your rules to take that into consideration if it's just catfish that they're catching. I know the one in Nashville, they're limited to 5, and it's the total weight of the 5 catfish, whoever has the most weight. And so they
Okay.
probably have to just amend their rules for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from the commission? Audience? Okay, we'll move on to commercial then.
Okay, we have a few commercial fishing regulation proposed changes. Back in I'm not sure when, spring or winter, we amended this rule, 1660-1-28, it's a license rule, to allow for, to create a new archery or bow fishing license for residents and non-residents type 119. It is a archery for Asian carp only, for silver carp and bighead carp. It's not for all carp, it's not for all species of fish, it's just for the Asian carp. And so, and it basically will, I think the incentive behind that was the reason behind it was to provide incentive for anglers that bowfish for Asian carp to be able to sell them, to kind of recoup the cost of going out there. Maybe they would shoot more if they could get some money back to at least pay for their gas. So we also wanted to include that as a commercial gear in the commercial fishing proclamation too, to allow the commercial fishermen to do that. I don't think many of them would try it, but we want to put it in there in case they did. So that's that one. This was put in there mostly for folks who fish for turtles. It's a turtle man here. And it's the act of catching, picking up, grasping, seizing, and or taking hold of something. And a lot of people will catch them that way, and that's not an approved method in the commercial fishing proclamation, so we wanted to add that in there. Also, currently you can use a dip net at Reelfoot Lake to catch turtles, but we've been asked to extend that statewide to allow dip nets, and that's mostly for turtles. That's a picture of a dip net. And in 2011, the legislature passed a law, one of which was this one here that said that all nets shall be properly buoyed to promote safety on the waters of the state. So we've been working with CFAC, and that stands for the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee, to come up with a regulation that would describe and make that law legal. So this is what they propose. We may have to tweak it a little bit, so it'll be a little bit more specific, but they should all be marked with buoy that floats on top of the water, shall be 4 inches by 6 inches or larger. The name and license number of the commercial fisherman must be attached or on the buoy. And this is more of a housekeeping regulation too. Currently, our refuges and wildlife management areas are closed during certain times of the year for waterfowl purposes. And so only for people that either, if it's a refuge, it may be closed at a certain time, and a management area too, it's only open for waterfowl. And that's for safety on the ones that have water. So people don't go fishing up in there, whether they're commercial fishing or sport fishing, and maybe get shot by someone accidentally who's a duck hunter or something. So we had wanted to specify which waters were open and which ones were closed. And so we have two groups. We have Group A, with open year-round. It's a Reelfoot Wildlife Management Area. That's the only one in there. Group B is it's in two categories. One is closed from November 15th to the end of February. You see those listed there, and then closed from November 15th to February 15th are the others. I want to point out that the Lock 5 of the Old Hickory Refuge and Wildlife Management Area is they only allow to commercial fish with nets above a certain area. I think it's the Highway 231. Thank you, Todd. So most of it's closed anyway, that upper section. So commercial fishing, road fish permits. This was also in the law that came out in 2011. It says Tennessee residents shall be given preference in licensing with a limit on the number of non-resident permits. And this is, of course, related to paddlefish. Currently, their resident are restricted to 80 permits. Non-residents unlimited. However, over the past however many years we've been doing this, we've never sold more than 6 non-resident permits in a year, I think. So what we're recommending is 70 resident permits and restricting the non-resident to 30. Turtle permits, currently it's unlimited. It's free, it's unlimited. But due to concerns over the snapping turtle population, by the way, they can only catch, with the exception of the Reelfoot Lake Wildlife Management Area, the rest of the state is limited to snapping turtles, and they have to be, the carapace has to be 12 inches long, or the shell has to be 12 inches long or longer to keep one. And also, states of Alabama and Florida closed their states to the harvest of turtles, so we're concerned about increased pressure in Tennessee as a result of that. So we're going to we recommend to limit the number of turtle permits to 35, and the non-residents to 5. The resident permits 35 and non-residents to 5. Now, the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee was also created during that same time in 2011 by law, and it's made up of 9 members of all commercial fishermen or wholesale fish dealers from West Tennessee all the way to East Tennessee, at least the Chattanooga area. We tried to get as much representation as there could be on there by having people from the 3 grand divisions. Couldn't do that entirely because, as you may know, that there are quite a few commercial fishermen in the West Tennessee area and not as many in the Middle and East Tennessee area. But the advisory committee was created in 2011. They met on June the 20th of 2012. And these are their recommendations. All nets properly buoyed. I've already gone over that. That's the recommendation that I showed you with the definition was from the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee. They also recommend the resident roe fish permits to 70 and non-residents 30. We concur with that. But they recommended on the resident turtle permit 70 and non-residents 30, which is the same as our paddlefish. We don't agree with that. We still recommend going with 35 and 5 on our permit, due to concerns that I already mentioned about the turtle population. And last year, the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee recommended doing away with the 34-inch length limit, and we told them we would discuss it at our biologist meeting, which we did back in May. And there was consensus was not to make any recommended changes there. The advisory committee recommends decreasing the channel catfish from 34 to 30, but the blues and flatheads increased it from 34 to 42, but they would not harvest any over the 42 inch. Right now, they can harvest one over 34 inches. But the recommendation from TWRC is no change in the catfish regulation. This is not a proposal or a recommendation. It's just something I want to bring to the attention of the commission, and the commercial fishermen may not be aware of this. Right now, the commercial fishing is limited below dams. They're only allowed to fish 1,000 yards below the end of the dam, whether it's a wing wall or the lock or whatever structure is there considered part of the dam. And this green line is considered the very end of the dam. This is Pickwick, by the way. And 1,000 yards down is the red line, and we put it on there for the benefit of commercial fishermen and enforcement folks as well. And then we also put the coordinates on there for those who have GPS units for their benefit. And all the other tailwaters, I think there are 7 more tailwaters that they can fish. I've been informed by Eric Gaines, our commercial fishing program coordinator, that they are all on our website today. So they can go online and look and see where those markers are to know how far they can go up to fish. And then one other thing I want to bring up is Eric has also developed this snapping turtle measuring device. Because of the curvature of the shell, sometimes it's hard to get an accurate measurement of a 12-inch legal length limit on a turtle. So Eric came up with this device here. It's a plastic handheld device. The one on the left would not be a legal turtle because he fits within the 2 markers there. It's 12 inches, and then the one on the right would be a legal size turtle. And these are going to be given to our enforcement folks and our commercial fishermen that fish for turtles. Correct, Eric? Yeah. Just a little bit of information I want to pass on, and that's it. That's all the recommendations we have for commercial fishing and comments as well.
Hey, what comments do we have from the commission concerning commercial fishing?
Looks like I'm old when talking, so I'll go ahead. Do you have any further data than you did 5 or 6, 7 years ago on the catfish resource, about the numbers and the health of the resource? I know that it was difficult at the time to get the data, et cetera.
We've got a little bit, but nothing on a statewide population level. Not much, I don't think. We got some. I say nothing. We don't have much.
And that was part of the impetus, other than exporting to the pay lakes, that he mentioned this morning about the 34-inch catfish, which I'm opposed to any change. And something I thought of this morning when you made your presentation, the hatcheries production is like 6 million warm water hatcheries, like 6 million fish, and you said that most of them are catfish.
No. Most of them are fingerling size fish. There are some catch, but not most of them are catfish. But we do produce quite a few catfish. I can't think of the numbers right now, but it's, several hundred. Well, no, not that many, because we have to produce our catfish at a stocking size. They're kind of like trout. Trout we stock very few small ones because they're almost a catchable size when we put them in the water, so fishermen can catch them and keep them. Catfish are just
we
about the
stock
same
the
way.
waters that are commercially fished for catfish, is the point. So we're producing fish, and
We don't.
we do not.
We don't stock waters that are commercially fished for catfish.
Okay,
Well,
good.
we stock them at agency lakes and urban fishing, kids rodeos, but that's about the only place we stock them, maybe
Good.
state parks.
And one more for next month. I do know that the Missouri River and maybe the Red River in South Dakota, commercial fishing for catfish was closed. I'd like to know what the result, how that affected the fishery and the sport fishing and license sales and that kind of thing. If you might know somebody in those areas, you might check.
Okay. All right.
Sir, you want to come to the microphone? State your name, please.
Talk about something else, but the Red River was in my thing here. The Red River has the biggest concentration of big channel cats in the United States. They used to be unlimited, and they have changed it to, the last time I was there, it was 4, limit of 4, under 24 inches, and everything had to go back above that. And they have built a big tourist industry on just that. That's where the money was.
What was your name, sir?
Wesley Roberts.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? How about,
I had one, it pertained to this morning in orientation. You said we had a new hatcheries manager or whatever,
Yeah. Hatchery we have a statewide hatchery coordinator, yeah.
hatchery coordinator, okay. Is there gonna be a website come up of when we're releasing fish and what lakes we're putting them in and stuff like that? A place where the public can go to and see, because I get a lot of calls wanting to know when they're turning fish loose here and there, and I just,
Yeah, we hope that's one of the things he works on. I mean, I could sit here and tell you all the different justifications for hiring this and having this new position in place, and that's one of them. Get out more information, more timely information. Right now, just for your benefit, the hatchery and stocking information, all that is really among about 4 of us in our fisheries division office. One of us does trout, one does warm water, one of us does the improvement project, and I work on all of them too. So we hopefully have one central person can do all this and hopefully get out some good information on our website about stocking.
anyone else? State your name again, please, sir.
Wesley Roberts. Had a long thing about try to tell you a few things about catfishing as changed over the last 10 years, equipment and things like that, but due to time, I'm going to skip all that and then get right to the point since this 42-inch rule was brought up. Commercial catfishermen are asking you to change this rule to 42 inch. They say they need to sell the fillets, that pond catfish has increased in price, so it's created a bigger demand, which that's true. There's always been a market for it. And they say they need these big fish to fill this market. It's not true. The big buyers that sell catfish, Kroger's, Walmart, and these places, they will not buy river catfish. They just won't buy them. The smaller markets and the other markets are the ones that buy them, and they want catfish 4 pound and under. The fillets have always come from the fish 4 to 10, 12 pound fish. A 34 catfish weighs approximately 17 or 18 pounds, depending on where it's caught. They don't want these fish. They're no use to them. These fish are going to Kentucky. Kentucky is a central distributing point for big catfish for pay lakes to the north. I asked a friend of mine, he said they were bringing $1.25 a pound now. They're catching some 80 pounders now, and that's due to the 34-inch rule. It has increased the size of fish everywhere. 80-pound catfish is bringing them $100. That's why they want the rule changed. It's not for fillets. It's anybody tells you that, they just telling you an outright lie. I would ask you to consider Alabama's law on catfish. They don't have this problem with commercial catfish. And it was, well, it's been 10 years ago when I attended the thing, but I showed them that these catfish, there was a truck going to Guntersville and they were hauling their big catfish off. So they solved their problem, and this is Alabama's law. It is illegal to possess more than one catfish over 34 inches in total length taken from Alabama public waters. No blue catfish or limited catfish over 34 inches in total length may be transported live beyond the boundaries of this state unless permitted in writing by the Commissioner of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And I would be here today to ask you to consider that rule for the state of Tennessee. And I thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Comment on that? Anyone?
I'd be curious to know what your thought on that Alabama.
Put me on the spot here.
This is my job.
Just started. You're supposed to wait a year before you do that. I mean, I think it would definitely deter movement of live catfish out of our state for pay lakes, for sure. we've considered that in the past. I think we actually proposed it or discussed it in the past, but it never was brought forward to a full recommendation. I can't remember why not, but I would prefer if that was a recommendation to come from the commission. I don't think we prefer to make that recommendation at this time. That help?
We've got 60 days to listen for comments, so, I mean, I appreciate that proposal, and if it's something that the commission or the public wants, then we'll certainly look into it. Yes, sir.
My name's Mike Kelly, for you new commissioners, and I've been in the commercial fishing industry for 37 years and seen lots of changes, and we've always been the most controversial group, and I don't think that'll change anytime in my career. But that's not going to affect me going to heaven, and the Lord may put me in a boat with a striped fisherman when I get there. We'll just have to see how that goes. I just wanted to share some things that I've seen over the 37 years that I think come into play in this discussion. First of all, through the 80s and up into the 90s, there was 3,000 licensed commercial fishermen in the state of Tennessee. And the target for those 3,000 people was catfish. And there was an unlimited market for these fish back then. And just me personally, just one guy, and I'm not even the top guy. I was just kind of in the average as far as what I caught. I mean, I caught right at 100,000 pounds a year during that time. And there's 3,000 of us. Today, there's less than 300. So just by the numbers itself and the boats that's on the water, it's not a drop in the bucket of what's coming out of the reservoirs as what used to come out of the reservoirs. Just wanted to give you that information. For the last 33 years, my primary target's been paddlefish, not catfish. And my request for the commission is assign us a commissioner that will meet with the advisory group and the agency to try to come up with something where we can fish for paddlefish in these lakes that we've been asking and requesting to fish in, the closed lakes. At this point, we would request that you would give us a 2-week season in the closed water. Leave the rest of the state like it is. 2 weeks. So why am I asking for 2 weeks? The big controversy has been the sport fishermen don't want us in there. You all know that. We all know that. And so I think as a way to calm them down and to give us a little something, when they start raising cane, and they're going to bombard you, and you already know that, 2 weeks. So we're asking you for a 2-week season. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Could I reply to that? Yes, sir.
Please do.
It's been about 15, 20 years ago. A group came down below Pickwick to the Botel, brought a truck from up north, put the word out to commercial fishermen that they were wanting to catch big catfish for pay lakes. In a little over a month, they took out over 60,000 pounds of big catfish. 60,000 pounds. That's over, at 30 pounds a piece, that's over 2,000 of your best spawners that they took out. Now, catfishing below Pickwick Dam, it declined for years. And I can get people that fish there regularly can tell you this. Now, if it was a coincidence or something, I don't know. But the fact is, it did decline, and the fact is, it is improving today. These commercial fishermen, they can literally strip the river with these nets on these big catfish in no time flat. And if they don't, and I can get a half a dozen, I can fill this room with people that'll tell you the same thing. Anyway, I just want to say they can act, well, I'll put it to you this way. Well, I'll go into this next month because I have a lot of facts and figures on how fishing has improved and all this because of the 34-inch rule. The 34-inch rule does work. Ask the people in Alabama. Wheeler and Wilson Lake are the premier trophy blue catfish in the Southwest, if not the whole United States, and they will tell you the 34-inch is helping.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more comments on the commercial fishing? If I could, I'd just, oh, I'm sorry. Come to the front, please.
Dale Robertson, and by the way, the thing didn't make it back around to sign. No.
Okay, this gentleman didn't get to sign. Who's got the list? Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm Dale Robertson, as I said. I'm a wholesale fish dealer and a commercial fisherman. And when this big cat thing all come about, there was no opposition from the commercial fishing group. It was sold to us as a trophy catfish, 50-pound plus. And it was going to go on for 5 years, and if it didn't dramatically increase the license sales, it was just going to go away. And it's morphed into what we've got now. This gentleman here is not correct on the size of the fish, because I sell to the restaurants, and fillets is what I sell. And that's why we want a little bit bigger fish, is for the money. And I just asked you to consider the larger size fish, because there's no scientific or biological reason for it. We were projected, the best I remember, 4 million pounds is what they said we could safely harvest, the commercial fishermen. And we're nowhere near that. The mortality is nowhere near what they say it should be. Bobby can tell you those figures probably better than I could. And I just like you to consider that the change.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know from Bobby if he has any, if license sales possibly have any indication of the sport fishery being more popular. I mean, do you have any information on that?
I don't have a specific license sale increase. What I'd like to do over the course of the next year is to do another survey. We conducted a survey in 2001 before the regulation was even considered to find out how anglers felt about the TWRC managing catfish for sport, for trophy fishery. And it was a pretty good acceptance. And then we asked the same question in 2006, and it jumped up quite a bit. So people had accepted, the sport fishermen had accepted our regulation even more. I don't know it's hard to get to glean that information out to find out how many fishermen are just fishing for trophy catfish as opposed to those who fish for catfish in general, just the small ones to catch and eat. But I think we had a percentage estimate of a couple years ago that about 15% of the people that fish for catfish fish for trophy catfish. So, and I don't know what the number is. I think we calculated out somewhere between 60,000 people or something like that, quite a few people.
Okay. Anybody else on the commercial fishing? Yes, sir.
My name's Neil DeFreeze, and I own Legacy Caviar. I'd like to know what Bobby or Eric Gaines, Tennessee Wildlife, intends to do about our CITs, if they're going to do anything. As far as I know, we're the only state that don't have CITs to export our caviar. And when are y'all going to try to do anything about the study, about opening our waters?
Sorry, I didn't understand the word you used.
I'll explain.
Do you want to, would
Yeah.
you respond to that, Bobby?
Yeah, CITES is what he's referring to, is the conventional of international trade of endangered species that, like the ivory from elephants they made that illegal years ago, and they also oversee endangered species across the world. And for people in the United States to export caviar or paddlefish parts or even sturgeon caviar, they have to get an approval from CITES. I think I simplified that pretty much, do that. Gosh, we could talk for hours about this, but I won't get into all the details except that the Fish and Wildlife Service paid for a study that was conducted back in 2003 and 4 to look at the paddlefish on Kentucky Lake. And it was their determination and recommendation from the study that the length limit on paddlefish needs to go to 38 inches and possibly even to 40 inches. So we set a plan in place back shortly after that time. I think it was 2006 that started it. It was 30. There was I think there was a 34-inch length limit at the time. Recommended to go to 36 inches, and then to go to 37 the next year, and then to 38 eventually, and not go any further, but evaluate the population and see if we need to go further for sure. And so we got to 36 inches, and the commission recommended to stop there and not go any further. And I think the last recommendation was made to keep it at 36 and not change any recommendations or regulations in the paddlefish for 3 years. And that was in 2008, and that was this past year. We've not gone forward because we've asked the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee we've asked them if they would like to proceed to go to 38 inches and beyond. There was some discussion last November, I believe it was, to go forward with it. We met with the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee, and initially there was informed consent to go forward with the 38-inch length limit and some other restrictions in there. And then, but apparently not all the members were in favor of going forward. And so we were asked to do a hard vote count of all the 9 members, and it was voted down. They voted not to go forward with 38-inch length limit. So we've held off mostly for that reason, also because we've obliged the 3-year moratorium on any regulation changes. One other reason we haven't yet is because there's the Fish and Wildlife Service is paying a group called the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. They're funding money through them to hire somebody to do an analysis of all the paddlefish regulations in the states that are open to paddlefish harvest commercially. And there's only 8, I think, including Tennessee, that allow the commercial harvest of paddlefish. And this individual is supposed to look at their regulations, any research that's been going on and during that time or in recent years, and try to come up with some uniform, hopefully some uniform or regulation. Maybe it won't be the same for the Ohio River as it is in the Tennessee River, but maybe for the entire Ohio River or sections of the Mississippi River or portions of the Tennessee River. At least there'll be some consistency, because right now Kentucky has a 38-inch length limit on Kentucky, portion of Kentucky Lake. Mississippi, and part of their waters that's open, they have a 38-inch length limit, I think. We have 36. We're at 36 inches right now. And hopefully this study will come out in another year or two. We'll be able to see what they're recommending, because I didn't really want to go forth and make a recommendation now and have to change it later, because it might be different from what we have on our regulations.
Bobby, when this first come out, Kentucky Lake was only supposed to be the only part of it, Tennessee, that was no CITs. I bought eggs, went to export them, applied for it in legal waters, still didn't get CITs. It went statewide from there. What happened on that?
Well, answer that. That was the Fish and Wildlife Service. That was entirely the Fish and Wildlife Service. They made that recommendation and that decision on their own. They didn't ask us for any information to do that. They based it on the fact that the most recent scientific literature they had was on Kentucky Lake on the paddlefish study that was done by Tennessee Tech University that the Fish and Wildlife Service paid for. And that they based that on that study for all the Tennessee waters except the Mississippi River.
Well, do you agree with that study?
I agree with the study.
Absolutely. Because the commission has the right to write a letter and give us our CITs if they want to. That's all.
Let me, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, Bobby, educate me a minute, or help my memory. If I remember right, when this came up, Director Carter wrote a pretty strong letter back to Fish and Wildlife regarding this on behalf of the commercial fishing industry. And then last November, when we thought we had a consensus of the advisory committee, we had already called a commission meeting to act on that very thing, and when that consensus seemed to fall apart, the commission did not want to act until there was consensus within the commercial fishing industry. A lot of words to say. I don't believe your beef is with us. We've been prepared to act. Our director has acted on your behalf, and I think this commission is still ready to act. But we need some direction, and that's why there was not any action taken last November. Am I missing it, or am I?
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Alan Fine. I'm a commercial fisherman from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I have just recently applied for a CITES permit to export. I have a copy of that permit in my truck, and I'd be more than happy to show it to you, and I would appreciate any help I could get from the commission. I'd be more than happy to explain what we need as fishermen from the commission to get that approved. Thank you.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
I'm not addressing you specifically, but I'd like to address the commission.
Sure.
When the Fish and Wildlife Service receives a request to export on paddlefish eggs, they just ask us if, a couple of questions. They ask us if the fish were caught legally, as far as we knew, by a licensed commercial fisherman in areas that were open in the season, proper season, and everything was caught legally, as far as we know. That's all they ask. They don't ask us if we consider it to be a non-detriment finding. That's a decision that they make. Fish and Wildlife Service makes that. We don't make that. This commission doesn't make that. That's
Thank
it.
you, Bobby. Do you have a comment?
Just
Commissioner
that I'd
McMillan.
like to get that permit and let you look at it, be able to explain it to you, but not now. It'll take way too long.
Aren't we waiting on the advisory committee to advise us what their preference is from an industry standpoint? Is that?
Well, that would help.
On this?
That would help in
And
the
So I
that's-
was
study
actually
too.
tried-
chairman of the advisory committee up through June the 30th.
And thank you for your, I mean, really.
And I sent a letter with that from the advisory committee, because Mr. Carter said that, I asked Mr. Carter if he'd like to sign on as the agency, and he pointed out that the agency doesn't make a non-detriment finding. And I agree they don't, but they had in years past. I've exported for many years, and the agency had always made a non-detriment finding based on what the commission said was the size and seasons that were set by the commission.
We were ready to act last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we were asked not to, or to consider not to, when the consensus wasn't there that we thought was there. And so we basically had a meeting that said this is not the time to act. And I think when there's consensus from the advisory committee, Ed, help me, and if there's consensus from the advisory committee, then we're willing to consider that again. Is that right, or am I out of bounds here?
Director Carter?
And what Alan said was right. He sent a letter to me asking me if we would sign on to some of the information that he had sent us to send back to the Fish and Wildlife Service. What I was trying to point out in that is that we had already written to the Fish and Wildlife Service. I had met with them on 2 occasions personally and talked to the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service and to the person who heads up their international trade. And they've all told me the same thing, that, you know, we're not going to allow export from Tennessee now because your regulations, they say it in a weird way, but they say we're not able to make a finding that your fishing regulations won't hurt the species long term. So that's what they're basing everything on. I objected to the fact that they included the entire state, because our understanding was when the CITES regulations first were addressing export of roe into Tennessee, out of Tennessee, that it was only Kentucky Lake and only the portion of Kentucky Lake in Tennessee. It didn't even apply to the other side because they had different regulations in Kentucky, even though we share the same reservoir. So in talking through that with them, they said, understand, note your objection, but we're going to go with the entire state because essentially the waters are interconnected and on and on. They made their case, but I just want Alan and the group to know we did make that request to the Fish and Wildlife Service to take it away from anything except Kentucky Lake, and we were denied. And they've essentially said until your regulations change to go to this length limit, We're not going to allow anything to change until the new study gets done. If the new study conflicts with the one that was done on the Kentucky Lake area, we'll reconsider. But until that's done, that's where you are. I'm summarizing a little, but that's essentially the conversation, both in writing and in person.
Thank you, Director Carter.
Alan?
Yes, sir.
Wasn't there a change in the vote of the advisory committee last year? I'm talking about, November. If I recall correctly, we had a specially called meeting to consider this, and then we were told that the committee had completely changed its mind, and it was like an 8-1 vote for not changing the regulation.
Correct.
And that's why we left it alone.
And we appreciate that. But I think if Mr. Wilson, myself, Mr. McMillan could sit down, look at this permit application, it would clarify everything and make it simple. 'Cause some things he's interpreting one way, I interpret another way. I just think that, a meeting.
Well, maybe I'm not understanding, but regardless of what you all do, or if you had a meeting, if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says no, what can we do about it?
That's why I'd like for you to just look at my permit application of what I'm submitting, because that's in there. It's a simple read,
I'd be glad to
20
look at
pages.
it after the meeting. I'm sure Bobby would stick around, we'll talk then,
Okay.
okay? That's
That'll work.
fine.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I got a comment. In 2005 or 6, we were going through this same gyration. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says, but on Mr. Bertoli's report, we needed to do something. So we had a 5-year plan to go to 38 inches and then or 37, 38, 39, 40, whatever it was. And I don't know the details, but it was a minimum of 38. 2 years later, the commercial fishermen pled to their legislators, went to court, came back to the commission, and the commission said, okay, fine, we'll go to 36 inches. You asked for that, you got that, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service cut off CITES because you asked for it. So that's exactly what happened, and that's the reason we're back here again, because of what you asked for was under what their recommendation was, or what their minimum was. So to put it on the commission or whatever is not correct.
Yes, sir, Mr. Kelly?
Tired of fighting. Don't want to fight. Just want to give information. There's so much muddy water here, and it's the new commissioners they don't know what's going on with all this, and it's so frustrating. We're one business that I'm sure that other businesses have same issues. You can go catch the fish, you can put the fish in the freezer, and they're dead. They've already been took out of the reservoir. I can sell them to anybody in the United States. But when I try to send them out of the country, that's when all this stuff starts. So that's one thing that's frustrating about it. You can sell it anywhere in the U.S. It's done dead. It's done froze. You hadn't saved its life. Just can't send it out of the country. Somebody asked, how can you help? I think this is a congressman issue. There's been one body of water studied, to my knowledge, in the country, and that's Kentucky Reservoir. The other states that are exporting on smaller fish sizes. Kentucky's is 32 inch. We have the largest, most restrictive fish size in the industry at 36. Nobody is as restrictive as we are. But our Kentucky Lake's been studied. That's why Fish and Wildlife is taking the stance they are. The argument is now they have applied that same rule to the whole state of Tennessee, yet they're not applying it to any other state in the country. That's where the frustration comes in. why did we get back to where we're at, Mr. Cox, is in this process, when we got up to a 36-inch fish, we've got to have something to sell. You can't throw back everything you catch. So we took the position of we'll have to lose our export, but we'll have something to sell to somebody.
Okay, Bobby, no, without other comments, then we'll move on. I have one comment that I'd like to bring up that obviously y'all are expecting, probably because I've been for over a year discussing the increased traffic and different conflicts that we're having with the different users of our rivers and streams. And I know that the agency has looked into that and had done some creel surveys that I assume you'll share the information with the rest of the commission. And I believe did you send it to everybody?
I don't think we've sent it yet. We just got it yesterday, and I think we were going to send
Okay,
it.
but I do think that I would like, and I think the rest of the Fisheries Committee, they've gotten all the emails that I've received. I do think that we need to have meetings in the Caney Fork area and one up in Upper East Tennessee where I visually see it, to see if we can't have a public forum and bring the people together that are using our rivers now. And maybe we're just can develop some etiquette on how to behave. If we decide that, and I'd like to see the boating division be part of it too, Darren, because the problem is the conflicts mostly on the boat ramps taking in and out. We have people that are paying for the river usage, which are through our license dollars, and especially in East Tennessee, we have a tremendous number of out-of-state kayaker, canoer outfitters that are coming in. When you see when the water schedule is going to be coming out of those dams, you better get there first, put your boat in, because 15, 20 minutes before the water comes down, you're not going to be able to get your boat in for at least an hour or so. And I know we don't own all those boat ramps. There's just a lot of issues. But I think we got to head this off because it's going to get worse every year. I don't know how many of y'all know, but in the city of Bristol this week, Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's are going to build new stores. And they announced it this week. That's just going to increase the awareness of the South Host and the Watauga River. And I just think it's, you just can't sit back with our head in the sand. I would like to see y'all try to put together meetings the next month or 2 months and kind of get this thing rolling more so. And I know that there again, y'all have done surveys, and there seems to be a high percentage of people that are satisfied with their experiences on the rivers, but it's going to continue to get worse. And like I say, if we can just even develop etiquette at this time, maybe we can determine later on if we need to actually start putting decals on rafts and canoes, or charging for outfitters fees or whatever. I mean, I hate to see more fees, but it's not fair. What's going to happen is our fishermen are going to quit buying license because their experience on the rivers is going to be deteriorating to the point that we'll have nobody paying for our law enforcement on our rivers. And then why are we stocking fish if nobody's fishing it? So I just think that we just need to get together and everybody get together, and I would like to see the boating division involved in it also.
Thank you. If you wish, we will summarize the information we have so far about the Caney Fork, all the meetings and the surveys, and we'll send that out to the commission. Is that what you would like?
That'd be great, but regardless of what the survey says, I still think we need public forums and invite these outfitters, invite the people, the fishermen. When I was involved last year with trying to get a trout outfitter's license, trout guide's license, I backed off because when I got into it, or when the fishery committee got into it, we determined that there was more than an issue of just fishing. We had to look at the whole ball of wax, and so I agreed to back off last fall with the understanding that we were going to try to do what I'm referring to now. And because of all of the politics of the commission and didn't know who's going to be here or whatever, we just kind of set back. But I think now is the time we need to go ahead and approach this and at least lay the groundwork for starting to get a plan of how we're going to handle the increased activity and the conflicts and all. I mean, obviously we don't know who owns the land under the waters, a navigable stream. I mean, there's just so many things. The more you're looking at it, makes your head swim. And I know we don't want to get too aggressive because we may end up biting ourselves in the rear end by putting the wrong regulations out there and then affecting the access to the rivers and all. But we need to start looking at it further and including the public in our discussions.
we have jurisdiction to regulate unregistered boats?
Yes.
We do. Okay. I guess my second question would be, if I may. Sure. Surely this has come up in other states. I'm wondering if there's been any system put in place to, for instance, set periods of time where particular use can occur. You know, you can fish between dawn and 9:30 or 10 a.m. and then you can kayak after that or that sort of thing. I don't know if that's been done, but I'd be curious to know if it has.
I think the problem with that, you don't have a constant flow in the streams, and so everybody's hitting it right when they start generating. I don't know if we want to get into that today. All I wanted to indicate today is let's get it started and try to pick some dates and start getting a collection of the people that we think would want to be involved. Maybe we need to publicly put it on our website that we're asking for, this is when the meetings and this is what it's about. Maybe we can, and I can sure give you the names of the outfitters in North Carolina because there's more there than there are in East Tennessee. And they, you know, they don't even buy a pack of crackers and they come down on the school buses packed with rafts and go back. We're not getting anything out of it except disgruntled fishermen. And we're going to lose our fishermen up there and we're going to lose license dollars. So, you know, y'all know I've been screaming about this for 2 years. I'll be quiet. So I just think we need to move on with it. So I just think we need to propose the meetings, publicly put it out there, and I'll try to see that, at least in East Tennessee, where I'm able to contact those people, that I can make sure the right ones show up. And I'm sure y'all can do it here for the Caney.
Okay.
Unless there's any comments, I'll shut up and we'll let Bobby go.
All right.
I appreciate the great work you did on these proposals, and obviously we have 60 days for public comment, and we'll try to react to it.
I'm sorry these commissioners put you on the spot.
Yeah,
like they did.
Yeah, we will, probably within, sometime next week, we'll put these recommendations out as the form of a news release and put them on our website and ask for public comment.
Okay, and we do that for 45 days?
Give or take, plus or minus, I don't know. We can't do it for 60 because we have to stop at some point
Right.
and get and summarize it and to give it to.
We'll be able to discuss it at the September meeting of what comments we've had.
We might have some summary by then, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I've had a request for a break. Let's make it a short break. Come back at 4 o'clock.